Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to It's Rainmaking Time. This is Kim Greenhouse, and we are covering a very controversial but very exciting subject today. We have Leslie Kean with us, an investigative journalist who's been published internationally and nationally in the Boston Globe, in the Baltimore Sun, in The Nation, in the International Herald Tribune, in the Journal of Scientific Exploration. She is the author of a breakthrough book called UFOs. Generals, pilots, and government officials go on the record. Michel Koku has also given her a wonderful highlight at the beginning of the book, and he says, at last, a serious and thoughtful book about this controversial subject. Skeptics and true believers will find a treasure trove of insightful and eye-opening information. This book is bound to set the gold standard for UFO research. Leslie Kean has also been part of a documentary called I Know What I Saw. She is the founder of the Coalition for Freedom of Information and is going to talk to us about a 5-year lawsuit against NASA. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Leslie Kean to It's Rainmaking Time. Good morning.
Good morning. It's wonderful to be with you.
I'm so delighted. I've been interested in UFO phenomenon on a forensic and technical level, very much like you've communicated in your book, as well as on a cosmology level, which I really felt that you were very mindful how you addressed all that. And I'd really like to begin this interview today with the distinction you make on page 10 and 11 between a UFO and a UAP. And I'd like you to explain that to the public.
Sure. And, there really isn't a lot of difference between the two, between a UAP and a UFO. But what's interesting is that they're basically two acronyms for the same thing, although the UAP is a little bit broader, actually, in its definition. It stands for unidentified aerial phenomena, and it's a term that's been selected by a lot of scientists who don't like the sort of baggage that comes along with the word UFO because it has so many associations of being something sort of silly, and it has all the cultural associations with sort of the media taking it lightly, and when scientists want to take the subject very seriously, they just want to sort of step away from that. So a number of them have adapted the term UAP instead, and a number of them who have written for the book, and we have original pieces in the book by officials and high-level people, some of them have exclusively used that term. But I think readers can think of it pretty much as meaning the same thing as UFO. There's not a lot of difference.
But the distinction allows the scientists to forensically study what these phenomena are on a scientific level rather than on a cosmology level, which can detract from the forensic level. Am I correct?
Yeah, the way I would say it is that it allows them a sort of to put forth a terminology that they feel comfortable with because it doesn't have the associations that UFO has. And, unfortunately, the word UFO is misinterpreted to mean something extraterrestrial or to mean an alien spacecraft. That's what most people think a UFO is by definition. And, in fact, it's not. It actually just stands for unidentified flying objects, something that one sees in the sky, which, we can't identify through our normal, in terms of what we normally consider to be something that one would see in the sky. It's something that really is unidentified, and because it's had this association with the sort of the extraterrestrial implications of it, that's why the scientists have chosen to use UAP, some of them, because it doesn't have as much connotation towards something otherworldly the way the word UFO does. It's really just a question of terminology.
Whatever this phenomenon is on a forensic level certainly appears, even in your translations and the interviews in the book, as being some type of an aerial object that is operating as if not from this planet. That's for sure, correct?
Yeah, it certainly appears that way. If you eliminate all possibilities for what it could be, and in some of the cases there's so much data that you can kind of eliminate any other possibility for it except something that is completely unexplained and unknown to us. And I think the most logical, deduction to make, which a number of these high-level officials have also made and are very open about, is what they call the extraterrestrial hypothesis, is the fact that it's coming from somewhere else outside of the planet Earth. And it seems like a pretty big statement to make, but you kind of are left with not much alternative when you read some of these cases. So you're stuck with that. And although, we don't want to assume it because it hasn't been actually proven to the extent that, is really needed, but nonetheless, it seems like a very rational and valid explanation for what we're observing.
I think the more you create space to study scientific phenomenon, the more evidence you'll be able to compile. I mean, there's a lot of evidence all over the world for so many years about what we're addressing and what you addressed in this book, but there isn't the professional space to come out and come forward. That's why I thought this was exciting also in the book. On page 13 of your book, you talk about principled skepticism is the foundational premise of this book, and you talk about astrophysicist Bernard, is it Heisz?
Bernard Heisz, yeah.
Bernard Heisz.
Heisz, yeah.
And he's the former science editor of the Astrophysical Journal and the Journal of Scientific Exploration. May I read what you wrote there as he defines a true skeptic? Because I think as a context, this is an important piece.
Please do. I really think he's got a great definition for it. So
he says, a true skeptic is one who practices the method of suspended judgment, engages in rational and dispassionate reasoning as exemplified by the scientific method, shows willingness to consider alternative explanations without prejudice based on prior beliefs, and who seeks out evidence and carefully scrutinizes its validity. And you called yourself a kind of agnostic relative to this subject. And I thought that was very interesting, how you can step back, be dispassionate, not necessarily assert that this is a cosmology paradigm, and go right into the scientific paradigm and create space there. You also talk about your 5 premises, but I wondered if you wanted to say something about what Bernard said.
Yeah, I think it's just a beautifully clear definition of what a true skeptic is, as he says. And we have to distinguish between true skepticism versus what we call the skeptics when we're sort of talking about debunkers. And I think we have to make a distinction between genuine good skepticism versus the kind of debunking mentality, which means when somebody won't even be open and consider it, they've just already decided that this couldn't possibly be, and therefore they've written it off. And so when people talk about the skeptics, it's a word that I think is often misused. Really, we should all be skeptics, and anybody that has an inquiring mind really is a skeptic in the sense of this definition. So I think it's just a really well articulated definition of it, and I see it as sort of the book being written for somebody who's in that kind of mind state, really, when they go through it.
I think that creating a context for what a skeptic is in the way that he describes it also allows people to ask the questions without being shunned. Really, it creates space for inquiry.
Exactly, I agree with you. And that's what I tried to do in my whole introduction, really, and this is part of the introduction that you were referring to, was really to create the space for somebody to feel completely safe in reading this book, because they're not being asked to believe in anything that they can't believe in, and to just sort of lay the groundwork in a way that I like your expression of creating space. I hope that's what I was able to achieve in the introduction, to sort of set the groundwork so that people don't have to feel threatened by moving forward into the book.
And I love that you talked about, a lot of times people ask the question, do you believe in UFOs? And how you assert that it's basically a baseless yet frequently asked question, and it creates endless problems in communication. So, for example, even me covering this subject on my show, because I do stuff about international finance, agriculture, climate and weather. I cover deeply a lot of subjects. It's a variety show. And I know that if some guests see that I'm covering this subject, that is even a potential drop in credibility. Oh, you're covering the subject of UFOs. As much as there's mystery and excitement and fascination, there's also associated irrationality to even talking about the subject.
You're right, and I have to say, Kim, I really